My spouse kept a lovely modest house before we were married, and he put my name to the deed. These days we utilize it as a vacation house. Since we only use it 2 or 3 times a year, we occasionally allow family members or friends stay there for a week or a few days when they want to get away. We have never had an issue with this, but I refuse to let my estranged sister and her husband to remain when they beg to. On that, my spouse and I are in complete accord. Currently without a place to live, my sister and her husband were renting for a number of years and had been in the same location for a considerable amount of time before being evicted due to problems with their landlord. They are in great need of somewhere to stay while they look for a more permanent place. Background. Growing up, my sister and I were really close. Throughout my whole childhood, a guy was my best buddy. As one might expect, the man is now wed to my sister. He's always been the object of my intense crush, and by the time we were 20, I was completely smitten. My sister was likewise kind of infatuated with a guy, but not really. I was flirted with by the guy my sister adored at a party when I was 20. I told him I wasn't interested in flirting back, but my sister was upset. "We don't do anything with guys that the other likes," she informed me. I concurred. In any case, I never would have hurt her in that way. My best friend and I had a different relationship a year or 2 later. I was flirting back with him as he was flirting with me. His physical passion was more evident as he began kissing me. We seemed to be gradually moving beyond being just best friends. That's how things were going until all of a sudden I found out that he and my sister were sleeping together as a couple. My sister told me she genuinely liked him and wanted me to understand, and he told me he wanted to keep his options open. When she turned on me for the person she'd liked flirting with me after I turned him down, and then promised and made me pledge we'd never do this to each other, I labeled her a hypocrite. "It is different," she informed me. I vowed to never trust her again and to change the way I saw her. I was informed that I didn't own him. I told him how crazy he was for having cheated on me with my sister. After that, her family, especially my other 2 siblings, took my side. Since then, I haven't spoken or seen my sister or her husband. Our parents were upset when I turned down their request for a place to stay because they had helped arrange it. My sister's husband would even venture to question me, but I was solidly on my side with my other sister and brother. My sister and her husband called me a witch for refusing, and even my parents said I was going too far with the estrangement by refusing to help. My sister said, "At least I can live out my dream because I'm married with kids, and she can't have any. The least I can do is put aside petty childhood drama to help them not be homeless." Am I the foolish one? If they move into a lovely, unoccupied vacation home, they won't ever leave. They will have no incentive to save money and move out, and plenty of incentive to make sure they always have a reason for staying, because any place they could get on their own would be far worse than the house they're borrowing. In fact, what's being required here is that you refuse to support their financial irresponsibility and lodge them for the remainder of their lives, which will render them dependent and needy for eternity. You're inspiring kids to grow into responsible adults. Regardless of your feelings towards your sister, you are not the stupid. The entire narrative of your sister, including this one, is essentially unimportant. Don't be an idiot for turning down her request, even if you were best friends with her. Here's why. They won't experience homelessness. They can move in with your friends, parents, or anyone else. They'll be motivated to get back on their feet and get their own place since they'll feel confined and uncomfortable. A tiny, ugly flat is nevertheless preferable to a couch or a room in someone else's home. OP, you have a lot to thank your sister for getting the guy. She is now destitute. He gave you a vacation home because you came in second. Remember that your sister and former best friend don't give a damn about you. When you complained, your ex-friend mistreated you and used you when he wanted. Your sister is self-centered and hypocritical. They're asking for something now, and you're meant to give it to them? I apologize, but that is not how it operates. You will never get anything from people again if you treat them badly. Are you worried that they might still visit your cabin, by the way? I would see to it that the locks and property were secured. This summer, my son and Wendy will get married. She is determined to have me fill in the void since she is not close to her own mother, for a variety of reasons. Given how strongly she is pushing, I'm not at all at ease with it. We're not friends, and my girls don't think much of her. But she has repeatedly crossed boundaries by inviting herself along, talking about extremely sensitive matters, being very touchy, etc., because of these difficulties. This week she asked if I could bake the wedding cookie table. It's something the mother of the bride would do with other women in the family. I've done some research, but this is the first I've heard of this custom. To serve the wedding guests, I would need to bake more than 1,000 cookies from scratch. My girls gave me a firm no when I inquired if they wanted to participate. I told her I couldn't do it because I didn't have the time and it was just too much work. I assumed that was all when she told me it was okay. My son called and informed me that Wendy had been crying about it, and that I needed to take responsibility for it, calling me a big jerk. I'm not going to do it still. Am I the foolish one? Did my daughter-in-law provide me with the phone number? Yes, she said that there would be 1,001 through 200 guests. How about family assistance? Her side is out since she doesn't get along with her family. I live alone with my parents at home. My spouse's sister may or may not wish to assist. Since my girls don't want to, I'll just be over 1,000 cookies. Not the fool. Never does one person create 1,000 cookies. Every woman, regardless of party, brings a signature cookie or a cookie from the bakery. This typically comes to thousands in large families. It may only reach a few dozen in smaller families or households with fewer bakers. You have a very low level of empathy for your potential daughter-in-law. She seems to have little to no support from her family, therefore it's possible that she wants to live close to her in-laws. It can also indicate that her lack of social skills is a result of her enthusiasm. Additionally, it sounds like you and your girls. Please consider that an imposition rather than an act of kindness. Your writing style suggests that you've determined she's annoying, and that you and your girls are treating anyone who wants to be close to you badly without having mature discussions about boundaries. Based on your writing on this young woman who appears to have had a difficult upbringing, you are the idiot in general. This is a classic case of, do I have to? Of course not. But it's also the morally and kindly thing to do, so read, 100% of it. It hurts to read about the insensitivity and lack of empathy. In order to achieve something, even if it's not 1,000 cookies out of 250 guests, why not collaborate with the daughter-in-law to make concessions, set more reasonable expectations of what you can handle, work harder and use some of your social capital as the groom's mother to obtain assistance from others? Your daughters are the only people you can ask, and they're also mature enough to refuse. This isn't how joining a family should appear. Something isn't adding up. After being engaged for 4 years, my fiancé, 46 male, and I, 44 female, have been together for 13 years. Together we have 3 girls, a tween, a pre-tween, and a toddler. We had chosen a June wedding date after a lot of difficulties, and 2 times prior to our engagement when we chose to take a break from one another rather than end our relationship. My fiancé is an avoidant introvert who struggles with impatience and has a lot of baggage from his upbringing. In addition, I had childhood problems where my parents would never give me money to buy new shoes and would always make me feel bad about how much I cost, which made me feel different from my peers. Yes, I have discussed this in treatment. I used to be a part of the concierge team at a condo and currently work as a front desk agent at a hotel. Since my fiancé is the primary provider for our family, I never felt comfortable talking to him about my financial difficulties because he was so flawless. Throughout our engagement, my fiancé and I have discussed purchasing a house and making fixer-upper investments. Long story short, I had to file for bankruptcy a year and a half ago. He works for a real estate investment company. I felt it was the responsible thing to do because I was being sued by Discover and had creditors overdrafting my accounts. He stated he didn't want to back out of this wedding because he didn't want our daughters to think he gave up when things became tough, which led to a lot of tension. But when he learned that a credit union had rejected my account application because of a report, we went through yet another rough patch. He assured me that one day we would still buy a house jointly, but it wouldn't be the family residence for another 4 or 5 years. Then he revealed to me 3 weeks prior that he had been closing on a house. The property is a duplex. I know of others that own a duplex and live in the first half as a family. Admittedly, he would have preferred my name to appear on it prior to the bankruptcy. I was upset, but he didn't apologize. Instead, he said that in order for this to work, I had to formally state that I understood and accepted his decision to not include me in this purchase. I turned to leave, stunned beyond words. I don't think it's ridiculous to suggest that I deserve a better man than someone who would do that, given it was a grave betrayal of trust. As he stated in therapy, if he truly loved and trusted me, he wouldn't have done this. In the end, I gave the ring back to him out of rage. I feel bad about it now, but he wouldn't even tell me what he did with the ring, so we ended up fighting again. I informed him that after a quarrel I deserved better than a man who just cuts off all financial communication with his partner. He simply moved back in after I asked him to leave the house for a little while. However, he stated that he is here to help with the transition and asked us to inform the girls that the wedding is off. He promised to find him another somewhere to live, but he would pay the rent until the end of the lease. Am I the fool for what I did? To put it clearly, you are 44 years old, still making poor financial decisions, not paying half of the bills, he pays the majority, taking out high-interest loans, filing for bankruptcy, which means he won't be able to get a home loan for at least 10 years. And you're upset that he bought a house without putting you on the deed because you can't afford it. Throw the hell up. You are a dishonest and financially irresponsible person. You're a leech taking advantage of him financially. You're too old to be making financial mistakes. Leave, please, and do him a favor. You are the fool. I hope he leaves all of his money alone so I can find someone who wants to plan our future together. Buying a home, making investments, raising our children, etc. Bless her, she had 3 children and awful credit. So bad, in fact, that it would prevent her from purchasing a home with him. Farcical. If OP believes she will be able to obtain a mortgage for years to come, she is insane. You mentioned that there seems to be a lengthy queue of potential lenders interested in taking on a single mother with 3 children, a 450 credit score, and a recent bankruptcy. But no one is placing you on a loan application just yet. You require counseling, financial literacy education, and a reality check. I'm 35 years old, and I've been married to my wife, 33, for 8 years. A few years ago, my wife gave birth to a baby daughter. In the weeks before going into labor, my wife was having a lot of emotional difficulties, and she basically loathed and began to detest me. She didn't want me in the operation room when she gave birth. Although I was devastated and my heart was broken by this, I supported my wife's decision. My wife was considerably more in control of her emotions after giving birth, and she expressed regret for her actions in the months before. She claimed that her main concern was not labor, but rather our child. I informed her that there was no need for an apology, and we both moved on. But I'm often reminded of how my wife didn't trust me when things were really hard for her. I suffered a fracture to my left arm a few weeks ago. I was outside and I started to fall backward, using my arms to support myself, and I landed on my arm. The pain was unbearable, and I'm still not sure how I managed to stay conscious throughout it. One glance at my arm told me it was terrible. The pain was unbearable, and I started crying. Tearfully, I contacted my sister, who arrived within 15 minutes and took me to the hospital. To cut a long tale short, I broke my arm, and the doctor advised surgery, which they would perform the next day since it would need to be prepared for. I received pain medication and was given a temporary sling. Medications. An hour later, after I called to tell my wife what had happened, she came over to the hospital. I told her I didn't want her here when she came over because I realized she was the last person I wanted to be around. My sister was there already, so there was no need for it. She was also advised not to come the next day by me. My wife was upset and asked me why, but I told her to go because I wasn't feeling well. I wasn't in the mood to talk, so my sister took my wife out even though she wanted to talk more. My sister spent both the night and the following day at the hospital with me. After a few hours of surgery, I was instructed to wait at the hospital for an additional few hours before being released. The doctors put me in a cast, which they stated would come off in 8 months. I was then sent home by my sister when I was released from the hospital. A few days later, my wife and I had a heart-to-heart talk. We are fairly honest about our sentiments. When I requested my wife to leave the hospital, she told me she felt very wounded and questioned why I didn't want her there. Subconsciously, I explained to her that it was because, during my worst hours, I didn't feel comfortable being with my wife, and she didn't trust me during her own dark times a few years prior. After that, my wife started crying a lot, and we didn't speak much more. We made the decision the next day to look for a couples therapist to assist us in resolving these conflicts. Am I the foolish one? You see, you're angry with your wife and have never truly forgiven her for deciding not to let you in the operating room. Even though you say you've moved on, you've continued to harbor animosity. Here, couples counseling is your best option. If you're both willing to work on improving your communication, there is still chance. Although everyone is a fool, it can be fixed. Hormones related to pregnancy can lead to animosity towards close ones. The wife can't control her emotions and hormones, so I don't believe it's stupid of her to want her husband to be there when she goes into labor. Although she apologized, she didn't ask him to miraculously move on from the incident. Instead, he gave her the impression that he had. She believed that everything was okay. He is contradicting himself. You cannot claim to have moved past the past, while also stating that it has always been on your mind. That is not moving past the past. Pretending they weren't there wasn't appropriate. Acknowledging his feelings was. No. For that reason you are the moron. Nothing shouts love like a 2-year-old grudge. After 2 years of marriage, my niece and her husband are very blessed, and I'm very glad for her. He is charming and amusing, helpful and kind, and treats her like a princess. He obviously adores my niece and will stop at nothing to make her happy. A few days ago, I told my niece that she and her husband had hit the jackpot, which has generated friction between the three of us, my nieces, their partners, and me. To put things in perspective, my niece gave birth to their first child a few months ago, and ever since, her friends have been telling her terrifying tales of women who sacrifice their careers to raise their kids, which has left her feeling anxious and afraid. Her husband transferred assets he possessed before they were married into her name, and ensured he couldn't legally reclaim them in the event of a divorce to allay her fears. In my opinion, it's a really nice gesture. In addition, he has been working from home or leaving work early when she is feeling stressed out or just wants him to be with her. Though I understand that not everyone has the luxury of being able to leave work whenever they like, I still think it's kind of him, especially considering that he doesn't get irritated with her for refusing to hire a nanny, so she might have assistance when he's at work. My other 2 nieces and their boyfriends were there too, and they're furious that I'm favoring him even though he's objectively the superior catch because he's my brother-in-law's favorite son-in-law. I tried to ease the tension by telling them that all of their partners were wonderful, but it didn't work. A particularly irate niece of mine feels that I was praising him for accomplishments that are simply above the capabilities of ordinary people, which is unjust to them. Is it foolish of me to suggest that my niece and her spouse have found success? It begs the question, did they marry deadbeats? Given their extreme sensitivity, praise others without turning it into a popularity contest since you are not the idiot. This appears to be fine on the surface, but it was nothing to do with the other niece's husband. However, after giving it some more thought and taking into account the harm you caused with your strange admiration for him, I believe what you said was either purposefully targeted or tone-deaf. Given his riches, assets, and flexible work schedule, he's already the preferred son, dog, nephew-in-law among the others. You are the idiot. I guess I don't believe you innocently said, "Wow, what a great guy," which is not something anyone, let alone multiple people, would react to unless something else was going on. Yeah, there is also something to the phrasing "hit the jackpot" after the husband moved money around. That is a bit icky. It's way too literal here. He isn't out there being a super dad or super husband, being praised for staying up all night with a baby. He just moved money around. Lady, you have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. A few kind gestures does not mean he doesn't have flaws. You have no idea what goes on when you're not around, and